Well, I have an extremely unique opportunity today, very different from what you're used to on this channel. But we are going to bring an author on who is not part of the Tesla community, has a lot to say about things that are sustainable and things that are electric. But we're having him on because I believe that Terry Keeley, or Terrence Keeley, depending on whether it's his mother or whether it's you talking to him, that he is a nuanced thinker about these matters. Let me just really quickly introduce you, Terry. Besides having been an executive at BlackRock, of all places, Terrence has founded and served as the senior managing principal of Sovereign Trends, LLC, which is an advisory firm for and about sovereign institutions. So I assume those are national, governments, or churches, the Pope, for instance.
Central banks, sovereign wealth funds, funded federal pension schemes, ministries of finance, official institutions, broadly speaking, Randy.
Okay, and then from 87 to 2010, you were a senior managing director at UBS Investment Bank. You oversaw the firm's transactional and advisory relations with central banks, sovereign wealth funds, ministries of finance, public pension funds, and multilateral organizations, including the IMF and the World Bank. Holy cow, you did some traveling.
I did. I've been to 124 countries and have more than 8 million miles on my American Express card that I have yet to use.
Oh my gosh. So you also served as a consultant to Pope Francis in his Financial Reform Commission overseeing the Vatican Bank. So you told a story with Jordan Peterson. Maybe you can give a brief version of it, which I was so impressed with, that you actually, I guess on multiple occasions, were standing in the breakfast line to get your breakfast with the Pope himself.
Pope Francis is a remarkable individual, Randy. I like to say that my church has the heart of Pope Francis, the brains of Benedict XVI, and the fortitude of John Paul II, because each one of those popes were extraordinary in their own right. But Francis is a remarkable individual. And one of the decisions that he made that was unique was to live at Santa Marta, which is basically a Holiday Inn that's within the Vatican walls. And it's a very open air, very communal, very modest place to live. He did not want to live in the papal palace. So consistent with how he thinks of himself, you know, as a steward to the world's poorest, the steward to the world's most lost and bereft. He lives a very modest life, and it's very genuine. Wonderful man, good man, Pope Francis.
All right, now you have a book that has been out for a while and has done very well called Sustainable, which certainly attracted my attention. And then you have a
Can I show you? It also has, it's right there beside me.
Yes, right.
The quote on the top of it is from Pope Francis endorsing the book.
Oh, interesting. Well, look at that. I have a lot of books out. None of them got that kind of an endorsement. That's a good one. You also have a new book out called Ending ESG and Restoring the Economic Enlightenment. That's only been out for a couple of weeks. And my intention, because I've done lots and lots of interviews of authors over the years on a Christian radio station that I used to have a show on, and I always made it a point to read the books before I had the people on, but Amazon let me down and the book didn't arrive in time. So I'm just going to go based more on your wonderful interview with Jordan Peterson the other day. Enjoyed it immensely. By the way, speaking of that, I think I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, what was it like to be interviewed by Jordan?
Well, I had met him at a dinner, at a private dinner a couple of months before, and my initial take on Jordan Peterson, Randy, was that he was an asshole. I thought he was very aggressive, and you know, I just couldn't understand why he was so edgy. He always struck me as so edgy, and this was a private dinner. I asked him actually at the dinner if he thought that his aggressive stance on issues was actually serving his cause. The next day, I got an email from him inviting me to be part of the 𝐒𝐞𝐞 conference, which was held in London last year. And then we since formed a friendship based on shared principles, shared ideas. I have a great deal of respect for Jordan Peterson's worldview. that talks about Jacob's ladder and casts a lot of the human experience in spiritual terms. I do believe we're spiritual beings that have been incarnated here for a period of time, and that we have responsibilities to each other and to our God and to our environment, which we'll get in. Our environment was God-given and needs to be enjoyed for generations to come. So I'll put that marker out there. That was a Pope Benedict idea, by the way, in his famous encyclical Caritas in Veritate, Charity and Truth, where he talks about intergenerational justice. And one of the issues of intergenerational justice is debt. We're creating all these debts right now would have to be paid back by somebody later. But another intergenerational cause that we have to be mindful of is what type of land, air, and water are we leaving our children and our children's children, and literally the billions of people that have yet to be born on this earth. We'll just have to be far more mindful of how we're stewarding those assets.
I couldn't agree more, and we'll get into all of that. We'll get into your real passions of sustainability and anti-ESG. But this is, after all, an Elon Musk and a Tesla channel. So one of the reasons I wanted you on was because I thought there was a pretty good chance that you were more nuanced as somebody in the circles that you travel, more nuanced than some of my Republican friends are with regard to the future of electrification, with the future of electric vehicles, with the whole idea of solar, wind, and battery. But anyway, so just let me ask, what are your general feelings about Elon and his company? Well, in Tesla in particular, his mission, which is all about creating a sustainable future, and the stock, because you are, after all, an investment advising type person.
Well, there's just no question Elon Musk is one of the most remarkable, persons and personalities of our day. I think there are really fair analogies between he and Henry Ford, who was just this extraordinary industrialist of the last century that just transformed the way human beings lived, and did so in a way that was always mindful. I'm talking about Henry Ford now. I'm mindful of his community, trying to create wealth for many, many individuals. And Elon Musk is no less important as a historic and transitional figure. I believe, broadly speaking, in the transportation transition that is now taking place. I think that electrification of transport is here to stay. As a trend, I just shared with you personally, I just finished a 1,500-mile road trip. I was participating in a triathlon in Michigan and needed to drive my bike from New York City back and forth. It never even crossed my mind to do that in an electric vehicle, Randy, because the country's not ready for that. And I didn't have any intention of trying to figure out where I was going to stop along the way. So I drive 3 cars. One is a hybrid. 2 others are combustible engines, but they're very small and very efficient with regard to gas use. I believe the future of electrical vehicles is going to be, on the one hand, bright, but very competitive. And I think the challenges that we're now seeing from Chinese automakers and the oversupply that we've seen from other domestic producers like GM and Ford, which have stumbled on their electrical vehicle rollout. That is to say, they created many more than were desired. There's a glut of EVs right now, is a cautionary tale for all of us about how much more infrastructure needs to be built across the country for EVs to really become the vehicle of choice. They are the vehicle of choice in Norway. They are the vehicle of choice in a couple of other countries, which are smaller and where the infrastructure has been properly built out. But you've also asked me, to comment on Elon Musk. It's not just Tesla, that he runs. He's a remarkable individual in a number of other fields. Personally, I think this idea of fathering multiple children with multiple women is not my bias. But we're all fallen in my book, and we all have the possibility of redemption. And I pray for Elon every day that he will have his redemptive moments.
There you go. So I would be remiss on this channel if I didn't clap back at you with regard to your trip. So you would be 100% correct with regard to any vehicle but a Tesla. So Tesla has a massive, massive national grid of charging stations. And when you're driving in your Tesla, you end up having a computer that is sitting right there, big old screen. And
tells you where to stop.
And it tells you exactly where the next stop is. It even kind of nags you about that stop. I even had a situation one day where I was about a mile away from a charging station, and it wouldn't let me get back on the freeway and navigate to the next location without going to the charging station.
I think the range is about 300 to 350 miles. Is that right?
Depends on the vehicle. Depends on the vehicle. Yeah.
So I drove 750 miles with one stop. I also did that the day after I finished a triathlon that I won, and I was sore as hell. So to all of you out there planning to drive 778 miles it was in one go with only stopping once, I advise against it. I strongly advise against it. Yeah, maybe a Tesla would have suited me. I have two brothers that drive Teslas, and they're very happy with their Teslas, I must say.
Yeah, so you would be 100% correct that the rest of the automobile industry blew it, not necessarily because there wasn't a ready market, but because people had a bad experience when they went out with their electric vehicles and they couldn't get as far as they would like to get, and so they started using it as a backup vehicle instead of their primary. So that's a real issue. So let me talk.
I wrote about Ford's Lightning. You know, the Ford 150 is the best-selling truck in America, and they now have electric version of it. And listen, I think that they will continue to improve upon that model. And you know, Ford has some advantages in the truck industry, including brand recognition and acceptance. And I think trucks have been a little bit harder for Tesla and for Elon Musk so far, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, so they've only just rolled out their first truck, which is the Cybertruck, which is a completely new experience. It's just been a review of it yesterday with Tucker Carlson and a farmer out of Maine, and the farmer said that the Cybertruck could do every single thing that he needed to do on that farm, as well as his F-150, and yet it's way more luxurious, way more better sound system. I mean, all the kinds of things, all the creature comforts that you could possibly want, in addition to the fact that it can do all the hard stuff. So it's a
listen. I'm no Elon Musk expert or Tesla aficionado, but I am deeply impressed by what he's accomplished, and certainly expect Tesla to be a innovative, permanent part of the transportation networks and industry for many decades to come.
Now, I did want to jump into, well, let's see, let's first of all, let's talk about solar and wind and batteries. You and I had some conversation back and forth by email before we did this, and I pointed out to you that I believe that we need to do all of the above. For the next 20, 30 years at least, we'll probably have to or pump as much oil, get as much natural gas, create nuclear. I mean, all of the above are going to be needed because why? Because we're electrifying, which takes all of those. And then also because of these data centers. And that doesn't even take into consideration the Bitcoin mining, which is using massive amounts of energy. So no matter what the folks think on the far left about, oil and gas, etc., we could build as much solar and wind as we normally can contemplate over the next 15 or 20 years and still have to pump every bit of oil and gas. Is that kind of where you're coming from too?
There's no question. I participated recently in a Real Clear Energy forum that was held in Washington, D.C. It can be found up on realclearenergy.com. And we were asked a framing question at the beginning, Randy, whether or not we believe that the best format for human flourishing was to adopt a paradigm of energy abundance or energy scarcity. It's a pretty easy question to answer. if you care about poor people, if you care about people having jobs and people being able to take care of their kids, of course you support an energy abundant future. What you then look at as how we are actually consuming and the ways in which we're delivering, you're absolutely right. We need to not only strengthen our grid, but provide a lot more voltage and energy to that grid. And I personally don't see how we can do that without all of the above strategy, notably with greater nuclear contributions. And I very much support Bill Gates's efforts now with TerraPower to basically bring smaller modular reactors into mainstream. They take up much less space. One of the problems with solar and wind is they take up a lot of space. I read that if we needed to get all of our electricity from solar in America, we would basically have to pave over Nebraska, Iowa, Colorado. All those states would just be covered with solar panels. So we're not being particularly intelligent about the need for dense energy sources. So I will say that I have solar panels on my house. I don't understand why more people don't. There are a lot of incentives to do it. It's cut my energy bills, my electricity bills by 70%. And I'm, half of the year, 3/4 of the year, I'm contributing to the grid, and other half of the year I'm taking from the grid.
Nice, nice. I want to encourage you to go back and take a harder look at what the solar requirement is. I don't know if you're familiar with Tony Seba, but Tony Seba has talked about the amount of solar that it will take. Elon Musk has specifically said that a 100-mile by 100-mile patch in the state of Texas, in West Texas, just 100 by 100 mile would take care of all the energy needs for the United States. So it's a
challenge. I challenge that, but let's one thing that we should establish on this call. It's something I always try to establish with my sons when we're having a debate. Wherever we can find a fact, let's rely on the fact. And I don't have those facts at hand. I'm sure you do.
Right. Yeah. So I'm just saying, I'm just encouraging you to re-look at that number. Look at Tony Seba's work. Look at Cathie Wood's work. Look at Elon's work.
Kathy, I'm aware of. Yeah. Okay.
So those would be three people I think that would talk to the real specifics of what's required for solar.
I think solar should be an important part of our mix. I don't know. I don't really understand why it's not a greater use with homes, particularly in the South where there's a great deal of sun available.
Yeah, yeah. Now, one of the other things I was just curious about from your conversation with Jordan Peterson was on the issue of, and you just talked about the poor, the issue of the population, the direction of the population. You mentioned that we have 8 billion now, which we can absolutely agree on. You suggested we'll be at 10 million by 2050. But I'm a demographer for 50 years. I've been studying it a lot. Elon Musk has been really, really going deeply into an understanding of what's happening with demography. And everything that I'm looking at right now suggests that we will peak as a world in 2045, maybe before, and that the greatest risk is actually for depopulation. It's being called the population dearth, the birth dearth. How do you feel about the birth dearth? How do you feel about, we're talking about the Bible, we're talking about God. God says, fill up your quiver with arrows. And you certainly had parents that did that. Mine did too, and I have 4. What is your feeling about the business of, let's let population grow?
So the data that I cited with Jordan Peterson and also in my book is from the Lancet, which projected that human population would peak around 2070 at approximately 9.73 billion, so slightly short, before it starts coming down. So, a couple of facts that I know we can agree on. We are approaching peak population, and after peak population declines. The Earth has never, and the human family has never had to deal with this phenomenon before. We certainly do not have our pension system prepared for this, because our pension systems are, broadly speaking, pay as you go.
Yeah.
And they've always relied on lots of younger people paying for a smaller number of older people. And that whole pyramid is about to invert, and that's going to create many social challenges and social problems that we need to be aware of. That we are coming to peak population. Also, I think at such a high number, let's put this data into perspective. There were 1 billion people in 1800, 2 billion people in 1900, 4 billion people in 1984, 8 billion people in 2022. So the globe has never actually had this many inhabitants, and certainly hasn't ever had this many inhabitants that are living as well as we do. And this is what effectively brings into focus the need for sustainability, the need for circularity, the need for us to think about what we're doing with plastic, the need to think about how we are going to have energy sources. And I don't know that we want to get into a climate debate. I'm somebody who recognizes that anthropomorphic effects are basically impacting our atmosphere and CO2 content, and that all else equal, that will lead to higher temperatures. But I'm pretty much an adherent to the Stephen Koonin school. He wrote a very important book that you may have read or heard about called Unsettled, that points out that non-human effects on the environment are far more determinative. And obviously, we've had 5 mass extinction events over the course of history since time immemorial. And in every case, those have been because of much colder temperatures, not much higher temperatures. But just to finish on the primary point, population growth ending and reversing will create many, many challenges, Randy. Financial, the high level of population that we will be at for a period of time, somewhere between 9 and 10 billion, that will could persist for at least a century, will cause individual societies to review a lot of what their national security needs are and how they themselves are going to grow their economies. Immigration is a really important part of economic growth. I've written an article that was entitled "Wanted: 1 Billion Americans." This actually is turning the immigration idea on its head, because we don't have a country that's very densely populated. Our country could support 1 billion people. We certainly have an extraordinarily high standard of living to be able to share. And I don't think that we would be talking about threats from China, Russia, or any other country were America 1 billion strong and living the way we do, because there is strength in numbers.
Yeah, okay, that's a super interesting idea. I would like to have them, however, vetted. I think it would be a good idea to know.
I don't think we should go there tomorrow, but and when it comes to immigration, Canada basically takes the cake in terms of having the right immigration policy, which suits their national needs, that has been very front-footed, but has also been very generous in terms of allowing more legal skilled immigrants have entered Canada in the last 3 years than have entered the United States of America. Wow. They are winning the skilled immigration competition. The United States, because we have no immigration policy, is not even competing.
Yeah, it's just crazy. So yeah, this will be a great thing for whoever is the next leader of the country to really get serious about a solid, smart immigration process that brings in the best and the brightest, and a fair portion of individuals who need a leg up and that are being persecuted, et cetera, et cetera. I'm all for it, 100%, and I think most Republicans are. I don't know why we need to rely on an open border at the South with no vetting, et cetera. So, okay, so I think
no, there's no defense for our current immigration policies, none whatsoever, no defense.
I sent you a note this morning. I said, I think the current zeitgeist has ruined the word conservationist. I believe I am a conservationist. I have been in the bicycle industry my entire life. And I have a solar roof. I drive a Tesla. I think I'm a conservationist. So I've come up with a new definition, which I sent you this morning. I'm curious what you think of my new definition. A conservationist is someone who is promoting human flourishing through the optimal use and stewardship of God's generous provision. What do you think?
Well, I think maybe even more than a conservationist, that's just a good person, a right-minded person. Lots of ways in which that statement will trigger various audiences, including the idea of God-given. And yet, I understand those and react sensitively to those who are unable to receive those messages comfortably. I'm a human flourishing guy, Randy. Just to be clear, I deeply believe that we are our brothers and sisters keepers. We are our brothers and sisters keepers for those who are living today and those who have yet to be born. And I frequently say in front of audiences that we will get the world we deserve, and that mindfulness matters. Just in an individual life, it will be true about our collective lives. I think that any society that is insufficiently mindful of their air, their water, their land, is going to pay a deep price. If you remember, I had this conversation with Jordan Peterson because I was pushing him a little bit. He's not exactly the world's leading conservationist, but he did agree, and we found agreement on the notion of protecting our waters from overfishing. If we have 10 billion people on the planet and we're all eating, fish, we're going to deplete stocks very, very quickly. We have to be mindful. Where can we farm? Where do we need to hold back? How do we? So there's a great example of there, being a need for an international fisheries agreement. I personally believe Paris is wrongly conceived. I do not believe that we can even measure with specificity 1.5 degrees, let alone well below 1.5 degrees, which is, is the Paris. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that we're already up 1.1 degrees from the pre-industrial era, which means we're all going to die in 0.4 more degrees. That's simply not true. These are really unhelpful and very dangerous ways that promote very dangerous thinking,
right?
Including, as I said recently in testimony before the House of Commons in Ottawa, the idea that climate deniers are our greatest risk. No, our greatest risk, Randy, are trade-off deniers. Okay. We simply cannot go to a zero carbon emission world as quickly as some people used to say we should, without there being extraordinary costs to the way people are living, the way the energy needs that we currently have in our current energy mix. 83% of the energy that we still consume globally is fossil fuel in nature. Would I like to see that come down? Sure. Would I like to see it come down because we've identified cheaper and better alternatives? Absolutely. Because ultimately, if we are not competing on price, and if ultimately we're not being mindful of prices, we're going to end up where Germany has ended up, where we just have a way too expensive energy mix, and that undermines our industrial base, undermines our standard of living. The Germans right now are dealing with this horrible realization that they were, on the one hand, overly reliant on a very dangerous actor, Russia, and on the other hand, that they closed down their nuclear power plants way too soon. And how California is going to achieve some of the things that they're trying to achieve without more nuclear, I really don't know, unless they plan to import a lot of energy from other states.
So I'll throw out an idea that I've been playing around in my brain for a while now, and
I'm not sure I answered your conservationist question. I hope I didn't take us too far.
You were
okay.
Good. So I've been playing around with this concept in my brain because I'm looking at China, and China has made a decision, I think 15, 20 years ago, that they were going to be the leading producer of solar panels in the world, which they now make 95% of all solar panels. They were going to be the leading producer of these, silicon batteries, silicon of the kinds of batteries that we're using to support these solar panels, as well as automobiles. And as a result, they're now putting in massive amounts of solar and massive amounts of nuclear simultaneously. Now that I don't like top-down government, thinking. I don't like where the government makes the decision for us and then goes and does it. But in this particular case,
It has advantages and disadvantages.
In this particular case, I think it's going to end up giving them a strategic advantage, and that worries me
I agree.
way more than the economic advantage. And so I agree with you on the nuclear, and I agree with you, by the way, on mini nukes, although I've been waiting to get my expert on that. We have a gentleman called Brian Wong, who's a brilliant scientist that we bring on the channel all the time, who he's been studying and preparing for a series on the mini nukes, because there's a lot of different mini nukes being developed, and none of them are there yet. And so that's why I'm wanting him to, okay, which one really, is going to come, and are any of them?
Let me just challenge one thing. You say none of them have been developed. We power submarines and we power aircraft carriers with nuclear. So let us, recognize that the technology does exist, but the way we put safety standards around those and the way we put other standards around those is challenging. We're going to have to, as always, Randy, make sure that our regulatory and governmental agencies are brought along just as quickly as technology. As technology tends to run faster than our bureaucrats do.
So that's true. So I hate to let me just finish the thought. So the idea would be that Elon has talked about a distributive energy approach in the United States, where we'd have lots of solar on roofs, lots of solar over parking lots, which France is doing right now, lots of solar, over canals, over ponds that we don't care about how beautiful they look, lots of solar wherever it just makes sense, in deserts and places where it just doesn't matter. But we would also use the battery system to be able to localize the energy so that we don't count so heavily on a national major grid. Rather, everything is distributed that way. That's also strategically smart. Not that the U.S. is likely to be overrun by hordes because of our location geographically, but it's still strategically better to have your electricity distributed. What do you think about that kind of a distributed approach to the energy?
Well, listen, so solar is challenged for a couple of reasons. One is its intermittency. It's you need the sun up.
Battery side. That's what the battery
right. But then the other thing is the distribution. And when we start talking about batteries and the demand for batteries, we quickly get into the discussion of the demand for what it is that goes into a battery, and obviously other forms of precious metals, and the amount of copper that we're going to need, the amount of cobalt we're going to need, the amount of lithium that we're going to need. These are also right now constraint functions for how much. I think what it does, though, is bring into clear focus, Randy, that there is no energy source that is actually has zero impact on the environment. We're going to have to mine a lot. We're going to have to cover a lot of ground with these solar panels. So let's as we have this discussion, very important discussion. I'm a pro solar guy. I think that in many places it makes the most sense. In many places, it's not possible. It is not the solution. But where solar can be accretive to the growing demand that we will have, both at a residential as well as a commercial standpoint, I'm in favor of supporting that direction. I'm broadly, though, speaking an all of the above energy guy, and I certainly do not believe that we should be boycotting or closing down our energy champions, our Exxon Mobils, our Occidental Petroleums, before we've stopped needing what it is that they produce. Right. That is its own form of self-destruction. And I tried to write my book Sustainable really with keeping all of the activists and protesters engaged throughout the book. I want to say we share the same goal. We all want to have a world of, to use the term, human flourishing, that has economic, spiritual, emotional, physical dimensions to that flourishing. How we're going to get there is worthy of a good, open, honest, hard discussion.
Yeah, let me just bring one more idea to mind that you may or may not have read about yet or seen yet, which is that the batteries that we're talking about, which actually have multiple different chemistries, so there's a lot of different
Right.
possibilities for how they're made, but they are 95% recyclable. So when they
Yeah,
natural
that's true.
their natural life is very long, but they become part of the circular economy.
Mhm.
So you now have, I'm going to forget, Strobel, who has set up this company, which, he's just 95% of all the metals in there are able to be recycled. So ultimately, the mining of batteries, the mining of the metals that go into batteries will be all mined from the batteries themselves, and there will be no requirement for future mining. So as much as I still want oil and gas 100% until we don't need it anymore, those are not recyclable. They're one use and done.
One and done.
One and done.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with you that battery recycling is a growth industry, and that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, all of these will be mainstream, taken for granted, accepted processes and technologies for sure.
Love to make sure that we get into ESG because, of course,
Mm.
Elon has famously been like, "What in the world? How can Tesla not be at the top of the ESG formula? How can BlackRock and others, which you were famously there and famously helped to eliminate from their?" But I want you to tell the story on that. Help us out. Tell us how you got involved in caring about ESG, what you've done to just hopefully destroy it, and why.
Would you like me to tell that story first, or my Elon Musk ESG story first? Which would you prefer?
I'll take either one, whichever way you think.
I wrote a op-ed for the Wall Street Journal when famously the CEO of Vanguard announced that Vanguard was abandoning ESG as an investment paradigm. And I wrote this op-ed, and Elon Musk retweeted it on X.
Oh,
So I have my articles have been retweeted by Elon Musk himself on
all
X.
right. You go.
Let me just say that I had 13 years of my professional career at BlackRock. Such a privilege to work at such a great organization, and I worked really closely and personally with my friend Larry Fink, who wrote the foreword to my book. Larry Fink, by anyone's estimate, has to be one of the most important proponents of stakeholder capitalism. Someone that gave full, throat and voice and visibility to the idea that corporations should be run, of course, for their shareholders' benefit, but also for the benefit of other stakeholders, like their employees, like their communities, like their suppliers. I was really by, Larry's side for many years as he was developing his own thoughts on this space, and we at BlackRock were big beneficiaries of the trend towards ESG investing, which at one point was taking in $8 billion of new client inflows a day.
Wow.
$8 billion a day. If you did not have an ESG product line, you were not serving your shareholders very well. I wrote the book Sustainable as largely a study of what is the proper role of business and finance in a world that we want to flourish. What should business and finance be doing? What should they not be doing? What is their province? What is not their province? Where do they belong? Where do they not belong? And I decided to make ESG a test case since it was sort of the newest, biggest, fanciest, fastest growing phenomenon in the financial world. As let me look at this and see if it's going to work, because I want it to work. My studies and my research led me to another conclusion, Randy. And I think it's to BlackRock's credit that they allowed me to still publish the book, that ultimately is critical of ESG investing in the following sense. There was never a time when the precepts of ESG investing, which largely speaking are about material risks and incorporating material risks into your investment process, actually generated alpha, actually generated outperformance of your shares relative to a broader investment paradigm, one where you just bought the S&P 500. Most ESG screened funds take out more than half of the members of the S&P 500, leaving you only half of the universe to invest in. Well, what's very clear is these smaller portfolios underperform over time, and they are effectively less risk efficient as well. What's equally clear, though, is that the way ESG investing was being deployed, which is through this divestment of companies, was not leading the world to be any greener, was not leading those companies to be any better. And if you actually believe in the sustainability thesis, which I do, that wherever we can make our industrial processes more sustainable, more green, wherever we can do that and do that profitably, we should do that, no question. That was really not part of the way ESG investing evolved. And I became very convinced, and even more convinced to this day, that double bottom line investing is possible. That is to say, it's possible to invest for a financial return as well as for some type of social or environmental cause. But that's really the province of impact investing, a different and much smaller field. It's only about about $1.5 trillion versus the ESG field and socially responsible investing field and sustainable investing field, which according to Bloomberg is about $30 trillion. My new company, you mentioned my old company, my new company, which is called the Impact Evaluation Lab, advises clients and advises asset owners on a very impact specific basis. You care about clean water, you care about issues of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, you care about minority rights or indigenous people's rights. This is a much better fund for you to be in than this ESG fund. And broadly speaking, of that $30 trillion, I think we're going to need to reallocate $25 trillion, a great portion of it, to have the optimal impact for double bottom lines, to have the optimal impact, both for financial returns, which are still important. I don't know many people who want their retirement plan to be in a strategy that underperforms the market by hundreds of basis points every year, because that does not lead to a very sound retirement 20, 30, 40 years hence. So returns are important, but so are for those who really want to prioritize a better social or environmental outcome, clarity and proof, which is what we do at the Impact Evaluation Lab, proof that these funds are actually being invested in a way that leads to impact, that leads to social change, that leads to some type of environmental improvement. That can be proven, and I think we should be much more assiduous about doing so.
So in other words, your double bottom line concept is the company, it needs to be able to prove that it's doing what it claims it's doing in terms of the social side of it, but at the same time be realistic in terms of whether the person who's putting $1 into that company is going to get a return on investment that is that they're satisfied with, given that they're going to be a double bottom line. Is that
correct? And what we've done at the Impact Evaluation Lab is patented a new scoring process, which is called the Impact Authenticity Score, that looks at individual funds and rates them on their authenticity, their impact, and their financial performance relative to their stated objectives. So that somebody can look at a fund that claims to be promoting 6 or 7 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and we can grade them on what in fact they're doing on those specific Sustainable Development Goals. Or there's a fund that says we're all about creating more low-income housing. We grade them on their actual ability to generate more low-income housing units. So it's a way of promoting transparency in a new field, and transparency is a good. Transparency is a good thing, not a bad thing, for people who are trying to do the right thing.
Okay, so then if we come full circle back around to Tesla specifically, and not the entire Elon Musk universe, but rather to Tesla specifically, Tesla begins with a mission statement of advancing the world towards sustainable energy. Their principal products all work towards that goal of providing a sustainable future. Their experience in Germany has even helped them to become the lowest water usage car manufacturing facility in the world. And so they recycle, like crazy in that plant. Recycling, of course, internally. I was a plastics manufacturer for 29 years, and we recycled everything that we could internally. And then we, to the extent that we could, we purchased recycled materials to manufacture our products, as well as seconds materials that would have otherwise potentially ended up in landfill. So there's lots of ways that, but as I watch Tesla, that always seems to be a focus, even while they become the first car company to be profitable in 100 years in the United States. So it seemed like they would be somebody who the individuals who are looking for that double bottom line would be rushing to, and yet maybe because Elon's politics seem to have slipped over to the right, those very same individuals who might be more inclined or suggest that they're more inclined to the sustainable future idea or to all the things that I just mentioned are not going that direction. What do you think?
Well, listen, I don't have the details that you have on Tesla's environmental achievements and environmental outcomes, but the way you describe that, and then of course my understanding of Elon Musk and Tesla's actual ESG scores,
right,
are a way we fill out the rest of the picture. One of the other criticisms that I've made of ESG is that we have multiple rating agencies out there, Randy, that provide a single score, a single ESG score. In some cases, it's numeric, that's Sustainalytics. In other cases, like MSCI, they're providing an alphabetic rating.
right.
But the intention that these scores have is to take every single element of this environmental, social, and governance paradigm, ESG, environmental, social, and governance paradigm, and reduce it to a single score. 6, AA, single A.
Right.
Right now, Tesla has lower ESG scores than a number of
Cigarette
cigarette makers, no, I guess. But why? Why is that the case? The principal criticism that Tesla has come under is for the G.
Yes.
Is the governance. Having Elon Musk as your CEO, as it so happens, comes with advantages and disadvantages. You're a very good proponent of the advantages. Some of the disadvantages are that he seems to live his life pretty hard. He is mortal, and basing a company on one individual's vision, one individual's when that individual is a winner, and great as Elon Musk has been, that's positive. But that over time, that tends to go two ways. The G in the ESG score for Tesla has been what has dragged their overall rating down. It doesn't matter. I hate ESG scores. I think they are virtually meaningless. I think that they have created this vast ESG, what I call the ESG industrial complex,
Right.
That generates multiple ESG funds that still fail on these two categories that I pointed out. I had a Wall Street Journal op-ed that was entitled, ESG neither does very well nor much good.
Yeah.
That particular Wall Street Journal op-ed was read 4.2 million times. Yeah, so that one got a lot of, just as my Jordan Peterson podcast has more than 400,000 viewers, turns out there seems to be an appetite for, folks who are trying to tell the truth, Randy, which is probably what keeps you in business. But I'll just share that whatever are Tesla's extraordinary environmental achievements, and I bet they are many, when it comes to ESG scoring, they are clouded out by the G, which many people feel is a risk in Tesla's case.
Yeah. Okay. So I couldn't help but, especially for this crowd, because the folks that are listening right now on my channel are 55 to 75-year-old men. Okay. They're probably successful because they're investing in, or they own, or both Tesla vehicles. And So that's who the crowd is. And for the most part, you used a word a few seconds ago that they would not allow to cross their lips except with some kind of a curse word following it, and that is DEI. So in the course of your judging, grading, analyzing these companies based on the actual results, we are now seeing multiple companies completely just taking out their DEI departments because it turns out, according to what I'm reading anyway, that the DEI idea was never proven to begin with, that there was no science. And that recently there's new science now that's showing that in fact DEI is not giving better results. What are you seeing in that regard?
Well, you're exactly right. DEI was, rolled out like many ESG theses, was rolled out and trumpeted as ways of generating excess returns or creating superior companies before there was any such evidence that suggested that to be true. Now there is a great deal of evidence out specifically with regard to diversity of boards. This research was performed by Alex Edmonds, who's a professor of finance at the London Business School. And the data is exactly the opposite of what is being claimed. That is to say, more diverse boards are not creating better performing companies. And it turns out, shocker, shocker, are you sitting down? I hope the audience is sitting down. If you want an excellent company, you should have an excellent board. I hope I didn't say anything controversial. Does diversity make a board more excellent? It can. There's no evidence to suggest that it's not something that should be considered, diverse points of view, but to have a board strictly based on diversity of viewpoints leads to poor performing boards.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that'll be a comfort to everybody. I'm sure, to at least most of the people that are probably watching this broadcast. I do want to go into one last place, which I think is an interesting thing. It made me think when I was reading your articles and listening to your conversation, and that was the idea of inclusion, because inclusion is very important to you. But like the conservationist definition that I gave up above, I think that your definition of an inclusion is not at all what is the definition of inclusion being used by folks that are trying to impose it on companies. But rather, let me give you what I think you're saying, and then you tell me what I've got wrong. Your idea is that as a society, we need to make sure that we include the poorest, the most downtrodden, the folks that have the least chance of success in life. We need to make sure that we're including them in the economy of the future. You go on, I think, to say that over the last 150 years, the economies of the world have generated massive amounts of wealth, which has turned out to help these lowest among us the most. And that's something that we should strive to continue for in the future. I don't think that's what the progressives are saying when they say inclusion. But tell me if I got what you're saying right, or expand on it.
Well, listen, first of all, thank you for the question, Randy. It is very important to me. It's actually my deeply held personal and religious beliefs that inform this viewpoint. And I always talk about Catholic social teaching in that context, which is based on 3 principles, the first of which I think is not controversial, and that is the principle of human dignity. That in actual fact, every single human being, every single human soul on earth, whether or not they're disabled or not disabled, whether or not they're Elon Musk or somebody that's just died in a barrio in Calcutta, they're equal. They're equal in the eyes of God. They have the same level of human dignity, and many things flow from that idea.
Like
the 2 other
United States.
Well, and what we wrote and what we said is still something that we're working on, right? We're still perfecting the union. But what I shared is the other 2 principles of Catholic social teaching, which I think are very important. The first is the principle of subsidiarity, which states that the most local agent possible is responsible. This is basically the idea of individual responsibility. Is your soul going to be saved? Is my soul going to be saved? It's largely up to us and a loving God. So individual efforts matter, and we're all called, I believe deeply, Randy, to realize our innate potential and our God-given gifts. But then it's the third principle. The third principle is the third principle of solidarity. And that principle basically says what I mentioned earlier: we are our brothers and sisters' keepers. That is to say, it is the duty of the strong to help the weak, the firm to help the infirm. We're about to see the passing of the wonderful Olympics in Paris to the Paralympics. And we're about to see all these extraordinarily driven, yet somehow compromised individuals through physical or some cases even mental handicaps come and perform on a global stage. Well, I'll tell you, I believe those performances are just as important than what we've seen out of Simone Biles and Loa Niles and all these other people that have Noah Lyles seen winning gold medals. You do too. We all do. We all believe in the innate idea that every single individual is a creation of God and deserving of equal dignity. So a lot of that feeds into my inclusivity thesis. And I'm just about to publish a 3-part article on policies that I believe J.D. Vance needs to promote. He's promised to remember where he's come from, a remarkable story of human and American achievement. Well, there are millions of J.D. Vances in our country that are not realizing their full potential. How are we going to help them get there? So I take this inclusivity challenge on 2 dimensions. One, I believe it is a responsibility. But secondly, maybe just as importantly, Randy, the fundamental truth of Christianity, in my opinion, and I am a devoted follower of Jesus, but the fundamental truth is that the way I promote my own solidarity, the way I promote my own feeling of achievement and fulfillment is by helping others find theirs. That is a fundamental truth. And I think that the inclusivity thesis, more broadly adopted, would lead to a much happier world, because we are fulfilled when we serve our fellow mankind, and there are too many people that are left behind that need our attention. So that's my inclusivity thesis. I don't know if that's what you expected.
That's great. I love it. And I have I don't know whether it was while I was listening to you and Jordan, or whether it was in a separate podcast that I was listening to, but it was brought up that the more government you have, the less people feel the need to or the inclination to go out and help others. The comment, maybe it was Jordan or maybe it was you, talking about, in Russia or China, nobody thinks about going out and helping others because the government's going to take care of it. Well, I have run into that same problem, here in the US, that the government has taken over more and more of the hospitals, of the orphanages, all of the kinds of things that Christian groups used to take care of, or other private organizations. It gets harder and harder to find a way to employ yourself in some kind of charitable organization or some kind of effort that might, help out these folks that are less fortunate.
I'm deeply admiring of the Mormon community, and what they do in the state of Utah and wherever there are Mormon communities is really think expansively about what their responsibilities are. In the state of Utah, they know exactly the number of homeless people and what their names are.
Okay.
And what they're trying to do about this. I don't, imagine that in New York City.
Right.
The point, though, that the larger point that I would hope to make on this issue of completeness and fulfillment, there is no marginal tax rate that gets you into heaven. If I have to pay 100% taxes, I'm just following the law. But that's not a moral. In Russia, in China. Because everyone says it's the government, or France, it's the government's job. It's the government's job. It basically denudes human beings of the possibility of giving to their fellow mankind, and having the benefits, the reward that brings. So freedom is. I hope this was a useful conversation, Randy. Did we touch upon the things you wanted to?
I thought it was exactly what I was hoping for. I hope that I hope that the folks out there got some new benefit from it and some enlightenment from it. I think that I encourage you to maybe even read my book on Elon Musk. The Elon Musk.
Okay.
That talks about him as an individual, as a human, as not just his biography, but as from one entrepreneur to another. I've opened over 40 companies in my life and had companies that had, my biggest company was about 100 employees. But I have that same entrepreneurial thinking in a little tiny way compared to Elon Musk. But it helped me, I think, to understand him in a way. And so it's a fairly short book, a quick read.
My life has taught me one thing. It's taught me many things, but one thing it's taught me is that I am not God. Only God is God. And I don't know where Elon Musk is on matters of faith and divinity. And
I think we're getting close.
Are we? Okay. Yeah. Well, I will pray for him. I think that anyone that acknowledges or fails to acknowledge, I should say, the presence of mystery in the world, the extraordinary beauty of the world that to me can only be divinely created and divinely inspired, may be missing an opportunity. We talk about revelation as another way of knowing, as another way of believing and thinking. And I talk about it in the Christian context, but there are Eastern European traditions too that clearly outlined greater mindfulness and awareness and love as being the primary way in which we realize our deepest selves. I just don't know where Elon is on all that, but I would like to say this to Elon: Godspeed.
That's right.
Godspeed.
All right, Terry Keeley, thank you so much for coming on board today. Maybe we'll do it again. It was a great deal of fun for me. And to all of you out there, it has been great talking to you.
Thanks, Randy.